Krishna, everyone. A warm welcome back to our continued series on the glories of our beloved Sri Vrindavan Dham. Happy to be with you again. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishnaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarane. All glories to Prabhupada. So, today we'll continue with our series on Govardhan Hill by sharing a pastime of a very, very special deity intimately connected to Govardhan Hill, and that is the famous deity of Gopal, who was discovered on Govardhan Hill by Madon Vindapuri and is now being worshipped in Nathdwar as Srinathji. There's many nice details about Gopal in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Leela chapter 4. Of course, Govardhan Hill itself is a special deity himself. I was just reading, I like to read the correspondence, Prabhupada's correspondence with his disciples and other persons, and I came across the other night a really wonderful letter where Prabhupada identifies Govardhan Hill as Krishna himself. And it's a letter to one of my very dear friends, Giriraj Maharaj. The letter is dated July 5th, 1969. And Prabhupada writes, "My dear Giriraj, please accept my blessings. I beg to acknowledge receipt of your letter dated July 2nd, 1969, along with your beads. I have chanted on them, and your initiated name is Giriraj. Giriraj is a name of the Govardhan Hill on which Krishna used to tend his cows. In Vrindavan, the Govardhan Hill is worshipped as a representation of Krishna. Sometimes devotees take stone from Govardhan Hill and keep it at home as a representation of Krishna, and they worship in this way." So Giriraj, he's also a deity. He's probably the biggest deity we know. And super extra special in the sense that he's so kind that his darshan never closes. In temples, curtains open and close to reveal the deity, but Giriraj Govardhan's darshan, it's always open. But the deity of Gopal, discovered by Madon Vindapuri, very special. I've had the opportunity to see him up close. I've been to Nathdwar a few times. And on one occasion, we had a special darshan. And I saw that Gopal, or Srinathji as he's known in Nathdwar now, he's a beautiful black stone deity of Krishna. He's standing with his left hand upraised, holding up Govardhan Hill. And he's actually a relief deity, meaning that he's protruding from a stone base behind him. The deity's all carved from one block, and that stone is still there, and he's protruding from that stone base. And that stone base, which is around him, behind him, I noticed a number of special marks on that base. I actually wrote them down. I saw two cows. I saw a snake. A lion is carved into that base. Two peacocks. A parrot by the Lord's head. Two sages seated on his right side, and a third on his left side. And below the sages is another snake. And around the Lord's neck, carved as part of the deity, around the Lord's neck is a flower garland, also resembling a black snake. It's really interesting. That's a very popular darshan. You go to Nathdwar, you have to wait in a huge crowd, and everyone squeezes in a little area, and then the curtain opens and then closes. So it's a beautiful darshan. But the history of this deity, of Gopal, it goes back even before Madon Vindapuri. back to the time of Lord Krishna. Or let us say, just after Krishna disappeared from the earth. At the time of Krishna's disappearance from this world, Maharaj Yudhishthira was ruling India, or for the world for that matter, because he's described as emperor. And emperor means king of kings. But after Lord Krishna departed, we read in Bhagavatam, Yudhishthira retired with his 4 brothers, the 5 Pandavas, and with Draupadi, we read they walked into the Himalayan mountains and onto the spiritual world. But before Yudhishthira retired, he passed his empire on to his grandson, Maharaj Parikshit, as was the custom. And I was reading that he also posted Brajranab, who is the great-grandson of Lord Krishna. He posted him as the king of Mathura. I thought that was interesting. We discussed in an earlier lecture how Ugrasena was the king of Mathura for some time until he was usurped by Kamsa. So here we hear how Brajranab, the great-grandson of Krishna, he's being installed as the king of Mathura. So one day, the emperor, Maharaj Parikshit, decided to visit Brajranab in Mathura. And on that visit, they discussed their duties as rulers. And their discussion and the subsequent actions they took as a result of that discussion are actually described in great detail in Skanda Purana, Part 2, Section 4, Chapters 1 to 4. I just stumbled across that. And it's so interesting to read what happened as a result of their talk. During their talks, Brajranaba, he expressed concern about nearby Vrindavan. He's the king of Mathura, which included, of course, Vrindavan and other surrounding areas. And he's in that discussion, he's expressing a lot of concern about Vrindavan. He said to the emperor, Maharaj Parikshit, and I quote, Parikshit, since your father, the great Abhimanyu, personally taught me how to use a bow, I have no fear of enemies. However, I have been troubled by the desolation of the forest surrounding Mathura. Mathura is thriving, its residents are prosperous and happy, but the area that surrounds Mathura, specifically Sri Vrindavan Dham, it's virtually now uninhabited. All its villages are deserted. I ask you, where have all of Braja's people gone? So Maharaj Parikshit, he agreed the situation was very concerning. They wanted to do something about it because Braj was very dear to them because it's very dear to Krishna. So Maharaj Parikshit, it's described in Skanda Purana, he called for the great sage Sandilya Rishi. Sandilya Rishi. Now this Sandilya Rishi, you come across him quite often in Vedic scriptures. He's a famous sage. Sometimes he's referred to as Sandilya Muni. And he was previously, I discovered, the spiritual master of Nanda Maharaj, one of the mentors for Nanda Maharaj. So Maharaj Parikshit called him for some guidance on the situation, what to do with Braj. It's been deserted, it's desolate, it's falling apart. So Skanda Purana describes that when Sandilya Muni arrived, he quote, unraveled the mysteries of how Vrindavan appeared so abandoned and desolate. And he also gave Parikshit and Brajranab advice how to bring Vrindavan back to its original glory, how to restore Vrindavan. And when I read that, I thought that's really interesting because, you know, we generally hear about the restoration of Vrindavan in relationship to Lord Chaitanya's instruction to the 6 Goswamis to go to Vrindavan and revive it. find the lost places of Krishna's pastimes, establish temples, deities, write books on the science of Krishna consciousness. This was 500 years ago. But it appears that this was the original restoration. From time to time, these things happen. We have to restore the glories of Krishna on this earth planet. So that the sage began. He said, and I quote this part of Skanda Purana, Parikshit, Brajanab, listen attentively. The root Braj, V-R-A-J, means to spread. And because the transcendental blissful land of Sri Krishna is spread everywhere, it's called Braja. Braja. Now, when Krishna appeared on earth, he says, in the region of Mathura, he manifested before everyone's eyes his eternal abode, along with his eternal companions, such as Shri Radhika, Balaram, Yashoda, Nanda Maharaj, and others. Then he says, it's interesting, at that time, some fortunate souls, demigods, devotees, and others, they joined his transcendental pastimes. And by contact with the Lord and his eternal associates, those persons attained perfection. And after Krishna departed, the demigods returned to heaven, and those devotees who joined him, they were elevated to the status of eternal associates. And all the Brajbasis, those who were eternal associates and those who became perfected by association, they all went back to Goloka. And then he says, and others like Kamsa, they were simply liberated. Then he says, thereafter, the eternal aprakat, unmanifest pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan became imperceptible to material vision. In other words, even when Krishna goes back to the spiritual world, he remains in Vrindavan in an unmanifest form. You have to have spiritual vision to see the pastimes are still going on, they're still continuing. So he goes on, the sage. So now, Brajanab, realized souls, they can see Vrindavan as the eternal abode of God. But ordinary people see your kingdom, meaning Vrindavan, as only 12 desolate forests now. So for the welfare of the common man and aspiring transcendentalists alike, please colonize the original villages of Braj and name them according to the corresponding pastimes that Krishna enacted there. Rebuild the area around Govardhan, Dirghapura, Mahavan, Nandagram, and Brihat Sanu. Restore the riverbanks, the lakes, the groves, and mountains to their original glory. In this way you will serve the people of this planet. He goes on, O pious king, do not doubt this. By my blessings and by the strength of your own devotion, you will succeed. Your kingdom will flourish, your subjects will prosper, and Lord Krishna will be pleased. For future generations, this is interesting, for future generations, restore and preserve the places of Krishna's pastimes to the naked eye. And you will gain not only unending fame, but also the mercy of this land. Braja will be merciful to you. This land of divine existence, knowledge, and bliss. Now proceed, and I will assist you from time to time. Wow. Restoring the beauty of Braj as even the common man could see it with his eyes when Krishna was present. It was still present, uppercut to the spiritual eyes, but unmanifest to the naked eye. So the sage was very kind to the people of that time and to all of us as well. He mentioned future generations. Just see how the sages are all our ever well-wisher. They're always thinking about the prospect of giving Vrindavan to everyone, past, present, and future. So with that, the sage, Sandilya, he stopped speaking and is described absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. He returned to his ashram, leaving Maharaj Parikshit and Brajanav embracing each other in great joy. I can understand that because, well, nowadays when you go to Vrindavan, you see, because of Kali Yuga, all the commercialization of Vrindavan and the big apartments going up and the mismanagement, etc. We don't see Vrindavan in its real glory. So many devotees in the past decades have trying to work to restore Vrindavan to its original glory, so that when the common people, like just tourists or many spiritual seekers coming to India, when they come, at least to their naked eye, it'll be something very beautiful, and they'll want to stay there and then understand the spiritual benefit as well. So I think this idea of restoring Vrindavan is a common theme for the Vaishnavas. We want it to look as Krishna, as it was when Krishna was here 5,000 years ago. Maybe in future generations that will be achieved, like a spiritual wonderland, a spiritual Disneyland. So at that time, the original restoration, Maharaj Parikshit began to work. Of course, he was, as the emperor of the world, he was living in Indraprastha, something like New Delhi now. And he sent architects, engineers, craftsmen, artists, and masons to Mathura, where he was, or where Brajanav was. And then with Sandilya Muni's help, Brajanav, using all those personalities, going to Vrindavan, Brajanav with Sandilya Muni went to Braj and began identifying and naming and reestablishing the places of Vrindavan, because this sage has very deep spiritual vision, and he could say, this is where Rasa Leela took place, this is where Radha Kund is, this is where Shama Kund is, like that, by deep spiritual vision. And with great endeavor, it's described with great endeavor, Brajanav worked very hard, very hard. He founded villages, towns, various settlements. He dug ponds, wells, lakes. He constructed bathing ghats. And then I read this very interesting, Skanda Purana says, he invited good people from surrounding lands to come and live in Braj. They became the Brajabasis. And those who live in Vrindavan now, the Brajabasis, they're descendants of those persons. All the good people from surrounding lands, he invited them to come live in Braja. A big job. I read in one shastra that this was 200 years after Krishna's departure. 200 years. So there's a lot of work to be done. And one monumental way that Brajanav, this is perhaps what at least now most devotees know him for, although now we know how much he actually did to restore Vrindavan. But one monumental way that Brajanav restored Vrindavan was to establish deities of Krishna throughout the land. Because everywhere people were missing Krishna, it wasn't just in Vrindavan. Krishna had been on the planet for a long time, well over 100 years. So many devotees had fallen in love. So these people, common people from different parts of the land, they also loved Krishna. And one of the best ways to feel Krishna's presence is in the form of the deity. Another letter that I read in correspondence recently, it was March 18th, 1969. Prabhupada was speaking about the importance of deity worship. And he writes in that letter, if one attains perfection in deity worship, that is called Archana Siddhi. Archana Siddhi means that simply by deity worship, one goes back to Godhead immediately after this life. Another one of the great opportunities Prabhupada has given us. He's given us mantra. Hare Krishna mantra. He's given us prasad, he's given us the dham, he's given us the shastras, and he's giving deity. This is Prabhupada's unique contribution, especially in Western countries. And if one becomes Archana Siddhi, it means he perfects deity worship. In one's home, or as a traveler you have a deity, or you visit the temple, if you can perfect that, meaning the actual practice and the mood of deity worship, you go back to Godhead immediately after this life. So this is one of the great contributions that Brajranab made in giving the people of that time solace in their feelings of separation from Krishna. So he's famous, Brajranab, for, in particular, carving 16 deities. And I read that he carved these 16 deities and placed them at important places in corresponding to the place where Krishna performed a Leela. The deity was placed there. He had them carved from a very rare, and this is quite imperishable stone called Braja, B-R-A-J-A, like Braja. But the stone is also called Braja. It's rare and imperishable. And we can understand that because a number of those deities he installed are still present. And they're in very good shape, imperishable stone. And those 16 deities, I have the great fortune just to repeat their names, and I know many of them, or probably all of them. And for myself and many devotees who come to Vrindavan or live in Vrindavan, those deities are like our life and soul. So just hearing their name brings great inspiration. So Haridev of Govardhan, we discussed a little bit about Haridev at Govardhan. He's situated in a temple next to Manasi Ganga on Govardhan Hill. And you may remember that Mahaprabhu, when he started his Govardhan Parikrama, he started at Manasi Ganga by bathing and then visiting the deity next door, Haridev. So that deity was carved and installed and placed there by Brajranab. Sri Keshava Dev of Mathura. There's a whole history behind that deity. I'll tell that in another lecture. He's still present, but not in Vrindavan at the moment. Number 3, Baladev of Baladeo. We've taken our Parikrama party there 3 times. Very special, beautiful deity of Baladev, and nearby a deity of Rukmini. Oh no, is it Revati? Excuse me, Revati, his wife. And then number 4, Govindaji, Sri Govinda Ji, the beautiful deity of Rupa Goswami, who's been moved to Jaipur and can't leave because he's controlled by the love of the people of Jaipur. Number 5, the deity of Gopal, Srinathji, who we're discussing today. Number 6, he carved and installed Gopinath, who's now also in Jaipur. And then the 2 deities are known as the 2 Gopals. Madon Gopal, who later became, who was renamed as Madon Mohan, the deity of Srila Sanatana Goswami, who's now being worshipped in Karoli, and Shakshi Gopal, who is now in the town of, I think the town's even called Shakshi Gopal, in Orissa near Puri. So those 8 deities, and then 4 deities of Mahadev, Lord Shiva. We discussed those deities recently as well. Chakleshwara at Govardhan, Kameshwara at Kamyavan, Bhuteshwara at Mathura, and Gopishwara in Vrindavan, Gopishwara Mahadev. And then 4 goddesses. Manasi Devi at Govardhan, Vrinda Devi, now present at Kamyavan, Patal Devi at Mathura, and Yogamaya Devi at in Vrindavan. So, yes, these 16 deities. And it's said that Brajanab first had 3 deities of Krishna carved. There's the 16, but 3 were initially carved. And 3 deities of Krishna. Now, Brajanab, he was the great-grandson of Krishna, so he never actually saw Krishna. So he wanted all these deities of Krishna to represent Krishna, look like Krishna. But because he'd never seen Krishna, the mother of Maharaj Parikshit was Uttara, was still living at that time. So he called upon her to help him carve these deities. So she sat down with the carvers and she gave her input, what Krishna looked like. So Govindaji was the first deity carved. And it's described that the face of Govindaji most represents Krishna. Then he had Madon Mohan carved, and he represents Krishna from the navel down to the lotus feet of Krishna. And then he had Gopinath carved, and Gopinath resembled Krishna from the trunk of his body, from the navel of the Lord up to his neck. Like that. So you have the Krishna described from the neck, the torso, and the legs down to the feet, those 3 deities. Govindaji, Madon Mohan, and Gopinath. But it's interesting, and it's a famous pastime, that later when the famous deity of Radharaman manifested from a shalagram Shila of Gopal Bhatta Goswami, devotees were amazed to see that Radharaman had the 3 perfect features of Govindaji, Madon Mohan, and Gopinath. For in Radharaman, he has Krishna's perfect face. He has Govindaji's perfect face. He has Madon Mohan's perfect navel to the feet, and he has Gopinath's perfect navel to the neck. So, Shri Shri Radharamanji ki. He's the perfect, all blissful form. He's exactly what Krishna looks like. And actually, this is nicely confirmed in Narahari Chakravarti's Bhakti Ratnakara, chapter 4, verses 321 and 322. And I quote, "In Radharaman's beautiful form, the face was like Govindadev's, the chest was like Sri Gopinath's, and the feet were like Madon Mohan's. The 3 lords were all manifest in the form of Radharaman, a combination that Gopal Bhatta Goswami had cherished before the Lord's self-manifestation." And I think that's one reason that Radharamanji is very dear to the heart of all the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, especially ISKCON devotees. Although we love all the deities, Gopinath, Madon Mohan, and Govindaji, but I think the Radharamanji has a special place in the heart of Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So, in our tradition of entering into Vrindavan, we take the blessings of these 3 deities in particular. This is our tradition. We enter Vrindavan, of course. Entering Vrindavan doesn't just mean physically entering to the Dham, but there's a mood of entering the Dham. We take shelter of the Dham. We take shelter of Krishna in advancing in Krishna consciousness. So when we go to Vrindavan, we first approach the deity of Madon Mohan. And why do we approach Madon Mohan? Because his name indicates that he's the attractor of Cupid. Cupid means love of this world. Everyone's under Cupid's grasp in this world. But Krishna is so attractive that even Cupid is attractive to Krishna. So Krishna is called Madon Mohan, the attractor of Cupid. So if we're trying to become freed from the mundane love of this world, you could even just put it quite frankly, lust, we take shelter of all attractive Madon Mohan. And then our hearts become freed. Krishna says that it is lust only, Arjuna, which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. So yes, we have love in this world, but it's a perverted reflection of our original love for Krishna. And as hard as it may be to become freed from our loving attachments to this world, it's possible by becoming attracted to Madon Mohan, who attracts even Cupid. So that's required. To advance in Krishna consciousness, we have to become free from lust, anger, and greed, the three principal attachments in the heart. So it's not difficult if you see the beautiful form of Madon Mohan. So we worship Madon Mohan. And then when our hearts are purified, we engage in the service of Govindaji. And then we awaken our attachment for Govindaji, for Krishna. And when the heart is freed from material desires and our propensity is there to love Krishna, when that love fully awakens, we take shelter of the master of the gopis, Gopinath. So this is the authorized process of entering into Vrindavan Dham. First we take shelter of Madon Mohan, then we take shelter of Govindaji, and then we take shelter of Gopinath. So, in due course of time, all these Vrindavan deities that were established by Brajanath, due to foreign invasion, by basically Muslim, Islamic cultures, they invaded India. All these Vrindavan deities were hidden in jungles and lakes and rivers of Vrindavan. And this famous deity of Gopal was hidden in a particular forest of Govardhan Hill. Actually, each deity, there's a whole history how they were hidden at different times, actually, because these invasions, they started, well over 1,000 years ago. And deities were hidden, and then when the situation became safe, they were taken out of the hiding place and worshipped again, and then further invasions, and they were hidden again. It's a long, unfortunate history, actually. But at one point, the deity of Gopal, installed by Brajanath, actually installed that deity very near Govardhan Hill. So at one point, when there was a foreign invasion, Gopal was hidden in a thicket or a forest near Govardhan Hill. And in due course of time, he was discovered by Vindapuri. Vindapuri is another personality who is very dear to the Gaudiya Vaishnavas for many reasons. We understand that he had achieved the highest stage of love for Krishna. Actually, he attained the stage of Mahabhav, which is only relished by three personalities. Originally, Srimati Radharani and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because Shri Krishna Chaitanya Radhe Krishna Nahi Anga, he's the combined form of Radha and Krishna. So he had that extra special bhav or love. And Vindapuri. Vindapuri, by the way, is described in Gaura Gunadesha Dipika by Kavi Konapurna as a desire tree, a kalpavriksha tree in Vrindavan. He's situated at one particular kunja, one particular forest near Sevakund, so he's observing all the Madhurya Leela pastimes of Radha and Krishna. That just shows how every living entity and everything personified in Vrindavan is facilitating the Madhurya rasa of Radha and Krishna, irregardless of what particular rasa they may have with Krishna. It all facilitates Radha and Krishna's Madhurya Leela pastimes. So Vindapuri, that kalpavriksha tree, incarnated on this earth sometime before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he initially began revealing this Braja Bhakti, or the special love of the residents of Goloka Vrindavan for Krishna. So he's a very special personality. Another evidence of his special status as a Vaishnava is that he was the spiritual master of Advaitacharya. And yet another symptom of Madhavendra Puri's exalted nature is his departure from this world. So how is that? Well, when he left this world, he was in that Mahabhav, that feeling of Vipralamba Bhav, separation from Krishna. And as such, he was crying for Krishna in his final moments. But not understanding this, one of his, I think you could say, so-called disciples said to him on his deathbed, he was assisting him there, he said, Guru Maharaj, you're not supposed to be lamenting when you die. You're supposed to be dhira. You're supposed to be very sober with understanding that you're not this body and the soul is leaving to a better place. What's wrong with you, Guru Maharaj? So this disciple didn't know the difference between material lamentation and spiritual lamentation, or feeling separation from Krishna. But there was another disciple attending to Madhavendra Puri on his deathbed, and that was the illustrious Ishwara Puri, who later became the spiritual master of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he was a very deeply realized soul, and he was rendering menial service to Madhavendra Puri. And he, as such, he fully understood his spiritual master's mood of lamentation, and that his crying was symptoms of ecstasy. And that ecstasy we can appreciate as it was expressed by Madhavendra Puri on his deathbed. There's a very famous verse, which was uttered by Madhavendra Puri on his deathbed, which is very dear also to the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, because we also want to yearn like that one day. This is what we want to attain. So what was that prayer that he made? Ayidina Dayadra Nata He Mathura Nata Karavolyak She Hridayam Tvad Aloka Kataram Deity Brahmyati Kim Karom Yaham. O my Lord, O most merciful Master, O Master of Mathura, when shall I see you again? Because of my not seeing you, my agitated heart has become unsteady. O most beloved one, what shall I do now? It deserves repetition. O my Lord, O my most merciful Master, O Master of Mathura, when shall I see you again? Because of my not seeing you, my agitated heart has become unsteady. O most beloved one, what shall I do now? This is the essence of Krishna consciousness, this feeling of separation. And we hanker for that, but it can only come, we first have to be attached to Krishna. So that is our process now. Reviving a lost relationship. We've been separated from Krishna for millions and millions and millions of lifetimes. So now, first things first, we have to become detached from this world and attached to Krishna. And when that attachment is fully blossomed, then we can begin to understand what is Vipralamba Bhava. But we worship this sentiment of Madhavendra Puri from afar. And it's kind of humorous, but I remember in the early 1970s, 71, we would do Harinam on the streets of Detroit, and our Sankirtan leader, Bahulasva Das, very beloved godbrother, disciple of Srila Prabhupada, I think from reading TLC, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, he knew about this sentiment, and he understood, just like Vishnu and John Maharaj, they were speaking on these things in the early days. Wonderful devotees. So Bahulasva paraphrased that wonderful sentiment of Madhavendra Puri, and we used to sing it on Sankirtan, on the streets of Detroit. downtown Detroit, as the shoppers were going and buying this and that, and so much was going on, we would sing that prayer of Madon Vindapuri in a summary form. And I remember to this day, O my Lord, O gracious to the lowly, thou art now living in Mathura. When wilt thou come to me? O darling mine, my heart is burning in pains of separation. Oh, what shall I do? Oh, what shall I do? Oh, what shall I do? We used to sing like that. Something, we have yet to understand, and certainly the public, but that auspicious vibration, that precious gift of Braj Bhakti, which was later solidified in the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the six Goswamis, that permeated downtown Detroit, 1971. O my Lord, O gracious to the lowly, thou art now living in Mathura. When wilt thou come to me? O darling mine, my heart is burning in pains of separation. Oh, what shall I do? Oh, what shall I do? Oh, what shall I do? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. We go on like that. So, these are some of the glories of Madon Vindapuri. Krishna wanted a devotee of that caliber to discover him. So one day, during Madon Vindapuri's manifest pastimes, his travels brought him to Vrindavan, to the most holy place in Vrindavan, to Govardhan Hill, and to one of the most holy places at Govardhan Hill, Govinda Kund. And tired from his parikrama, I'm envisioning this all because right next to to Govinda Kund, on the Govardhan parikrama, there's a little rise there, and along that path, there's a shrine, and it marks the place where Madon Vindapuri found the Gopal deity. One of my favorite places, just to sit there and chant japa and pray for mercy. So that's where Madon Vindapuri came, and he sat down there. He was doing a parikrama of Govardhan Hill, and he sat there next to Govinda Kund. And he was sitting under a tree, chanting Hare Krishna, when all of a sudden a very charming cowherd boy, guess who, came by and said, Goswami, who are you? And what kind of meditation are you doing? I see that you're fasting because you're a little skinny. Why are you fasting? I have brought some milk. Will you please take this milk? Now, Madon Vindapuri was very hungry, but he was so enchanted by seeing the transcendental features and characteristics and personality of this boy, so much so that he forgot about his hunger and thirst. Now, we hear of the Goswamis, our six Goswamis. They also ate very little and slept very little. Prabhupada once described that they were even sometimes sick because they didn't take care of their bodies. So how is it that one could be neglectful of one's body if one's enchanted by one's beloved Lord Krishna? This is, one forgets about his bodily needs and just engages in devotional service. So he forgot about his hunger and thirst. And without answering the boy's questions, he inquired from the boy, who are you, young boy, and where did you reside? And how did you know I was fasting? And that charming, beautiful, effulgent cowherd boy, we're quoting CC now, he said, Baba, I live here, this is my village, and in my village, Baba, no one goes hungry. You see those gopis, those cowherd girls over there? Those elderly ladies, they've been watching you, and they told me to bring this milk to you. Take this milk. I have to go now and milk my cows, but I will come back in the evening to get the pot. So the boy disappeared, and Madon Vindapuri, with great relish, he drank the milk, and he watched the pot, and he waited for the boy to return, but the boy didn't return. And he began feeling some strange transformations manifesting in his body. The more he thought about that boy, the more his hair was standing on end, his voice was trembling. And then towards the end of the evening, it's described he fell asleep. And he dreamt. These dreams are actually described as visions in Scripture. Because when you dream, you don't have control over what you dream, but the dreams of these Nityasiddhas, these eternally liberated souls, that there's something different. They dream of Krishna as he is in their dreams. So he dreamed that that same cowherd boy came to him, took his hand, and led him into the bushes that surround Govardhan Hill. And there the boy, in the dream, said to Mata Vindapuri, famously, "My dear Goswami, my name is Gopal. I am the proprietor of this village, and I stay here in these bushes, suffering from heat and rain and cold and wind. Please take me out of here and install me on the top of this Govardhan hill and build a very nice temple for me. I was installed by Brajranab." We heard that. I was installed by Brajranab. But when the Muslims came, the priests hid me in these bushes and fled and never came back. Take me out of here. Bathe me with the water from Govinda Kund to refresh me. For many days I have been observing you, and I have been wondering, when will Mata Vindapuri come and render service to me? I will accept your service due to your ecstatic love for me. And by my appearance out of these bushes on the top of Govardhan Hill, all the fallen conditioned souls in this world will be delivered. Wow. Now, when I read that, I thought it was very nice that the deity wanted to take service from his devotee Mata Vindapuri. The deity wants our service. We want to serve the deity, and the deity wants our service. That is love, because love means service. You don't just love someone. The girl says, if you love me, do something. Show me. So it translates to love. The devotee wants to serve the deity, and now it appears the deity wants to be served by his devotee. And he explained why the deity, the cowherd boy. Because Mata Vindapuri had ecstatic love for him. And then I remembered a modern day pastime, equal in every way to that pastime, of our beloved Srila Prabhupada. That when he was very young, we read that his father gave him a set of Radha Krishna deities, Prabhupada Lilamrita. When he was very young, his father gave him a set of Radha Krishna deities. Very young. And Prabhupada said he played with them. And then when he got a little older, he began to worship them. But Prabhupada says that when he entered the Scottish Church College, he realized he didn't have much time because he was in school. So he put the deities to sleep and put them in a box, in a cabinet, in his room. And then one night, Prabhupada had a dream in which those very deities his father had given him when he was a boy, and he put away because of his studies, those deities appeared to him in the dream. And they said, Abai, why are you keeping us locked up in this box? We are eagerly awaiting to receive service from you. You see the similarity. Who is Srila Prabhupada? So of course Prabhupada woke up. He took the deities out of the box and he found time to worship them despite his busy schedule. That's how special Srila Prabhupada is. Same pastime. So when Mata Vindapuri woke up, he understood it was the cowherd boy who came to see him, the same cowherd boy who came to see him in the dream. So we know the pastime if you've read CC, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Madon Vindapuri went to a nearby village and he gathered some of the men, and all together they went to that particular place, a thicket near Govardhan Hill, where that shrine is now. And they got through the thicket, with their tools, and they found the deity. And they managed to carry him, as per his instruction, on top of Govardhan Hill. And there's described there was a flat stone, a Shila, and they placed him there, and then Madon Vindapuri arranged that. It's a beautiful description in Chaitanya Charitamrita that we can follow when we install deities. They installed Gopal in a fabulous ceremony in which everyone in the area participated according to their ability. Everyone participated. The Brahmins and the cowherd men and the cowherd girls and everyone had some little chore service to do for installing Gopal on top of Govardhan Hill. And I recently also found an appropriate verse for this mood of service. It's in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Kaviraj Goswami says, and I quote, beautiful verse, "No one is more fortunate than the residents of Vrindavan, because they've given everything for the pleasure of Krishna. They hold back nothing. Therefore, they are so intimately dear to the Lord." No one is more fortunate than the residents of Vrindavan, because they've given everything for the pleasure of Krishna. They hold back nothing. Therefore, they are so intimately dear to the Lord. Why are they dear to the Lord? Because they hold nothing back. Everything for Krishna. When, oh when will that day be mine? Atmanivedanam. We discussed that the other day, you remember. Full surrender to Krishna. It takes time, but time's running out. Vrindavan's waiting for us. Do we want to come back and take birth again in America, Brazil, New Zealand, Russia, Ukraine? Go through all that again? No. We want to go home. So we have to make a determined effort. We have to be conscious. This is our main duty. And abide by Prabhupada's instructions and by the instructions of our previous acharyas, that I will attain this goal in my lifetime and do whatever is necessary. No one is more fortunate than the residents of Vrindavan, because they've given everything for the pleasure of Krishna. They hold back nothing. Therefore, they're so intimately dear to the Lord. Kaviraj Goswami Ki. So later, that deity was established. And well, Madon Vindapuri, there's many pastimes we know how he went on to serve that deity by going to Orissa, but we won't go into that now. We'll jump ahead a little bit. That when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited Vrindavan, this is some time later, he set the example for Gaudiya Vaishnavas not to go up on Govardhan Hill to take darshan of Gopal. That's our tradition, because Giriraj is Krishna himself, so we don't want to put our feet on Giriraj. We want Giriraj to put his feet on our head. So Gopal's there, as Madon Vindapuri installed him at that period of history. But Mahaprabhu set the example. He didn't walk up, he just saw Govardhan from a distance. However, because of these constant threats from invading specifically Muslim and Turkish armies, sometimes Gopal was moved temporarily from the top of the hill to a safe location. He was hidden again in the thicket, or was hidden in the Govinda Kund, or to someone's house. So it was back and forth like that again. So Mahaprabhu was always hankering to have darshan of this very special deity of Gopal. And if Mahaprabhu is hankering to see him, we should also hanker to see him. And one time Mahaprabhu got the opportunity to have a close darshan with Gopal. One time there was one of those scares where the the Muslims were coming to that particular area, and they would sometimes destroy deities and temples. So Mahaprabhu was present. And they moved, the pujaris moved the deity to a village called Gantuligram. And it's described Mahaprabhu, he had the opportunity to take darshan of Gopal in Gantuligram for 3 days. So now he's in Nathdwar. So when we come on our parikrama, our next Kartik parikrama 2021, I hope, let's go to Nathdwar and take darshan of Gopal, as did Mahaprabhu, Madon Vindapuri and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, a similar thing happened to Srila Rupa Goswami later on as well. When he was very, very old, he was following the instructions of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu not to walk on Govardhan Hill. But in his old age, he was in anxiety because he could never get, Gopal's close darshan before he left the world. He wanted to have that darshan. I mean, just see, his Ishtadeva was Govindaji, and he had so much love for Govindaji, but he had love for Krishna in any form. And he had this special desire to have Gopal's darshan, but Gopal was up on the hill. So understanding, it's described, understanding Rupa Goswami's heart, the Lord very kindly devised a clever plan. The Lord arranged a plan. He himself arranged that some Muslim soldiers came to harm him, the deity. So Gopal's servitors, the pujaris, at that time, they took Gopal to a Brahmana's house in Mathura, all the way to Mathura. And that Brahman's name was Vitala Ishwara Das. And he was the son of the famous devotee Balabhacharya. So the pujaris, they arranged that that deity would stay there for 1 month. Gopal would stay in that house for 1 month. And hearing this news, you can imagine Rupa Goswami. Krishna, it's described Krishna arranged this for his devotee. Love knows no bounds. As a devotee wants to see Krishna, Krishna wants to see the devotee. So Gopal arranged this for Rupa Goswami. So hearing this news, Rupa Goswami and many of his associates, they went from Vrindavan to Mathura, and they stayed in the house of that Brahmana for an entire month, just basking in the Lord's presence. If we really understand the deity as a person, he's Krishna. We don't just come before the deity for a few moments and appreciate how the pujari dressed him that day and, look for a few moments. We'll stand there as long as possible. If we really understand Krishna's presence in his holy name, we have no desire to stop chanting. If we go on pilgrimage, we never get tired. We'll go to the next place and the next place. And this is Krishna consciousness. This means that we're getting some ruchi, we're getting some taste after some time. We want to be in the deity's presence. We want to keep chanting. We want to keep going on parikrama. We hanker for the devotees' association. As much as we do want to take prasadam, that's perhaps our initial attraction, but that's fine. So they stayed for 1 month. Rupa Goswami stayed for 1 month in the house of that Brahmin. And who went with him? Who were the advanced devotees who went with him? It's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita. They're listed. Actually, yes, they're listed, but a more complete list is given. I found it in Bhakti Ratnakara. Seek and ye shall find. Our books are like treasure chests. We should be reading these books day in and day out. And actually, this is something I must admit I was not so attentive to for so many years. Although I did, but now by your mercy, I have to read a lot every day, like 8, 9, 10 hours a day. And I'm relishing it so much. Although I'm not staying directly in Vrindavan because of COVID, I moved out a little bit away from Vrindavan. I feel I'm living in Vrindavan by constantly absorbing myself in the Bhakti Shastras. Because I'm always forced to think like this. So it's a great pleasure. And I hope that I'll have this opportunity when I keep traveling again, because it's so relishable. Reading Gita, reading Bhagavatam, reading CC, Goswami literature, Brihad Bhagavatamrita especially. So in Bhakti Ratnakara, 6th wave, I found a full list of those devotees who accompanied Rupa Goswami to Mathura. And I was thinking, such a practical thing. You know, we think of the Goswamis in many ways, but here they are. Here's Rupa Goswami in his old age, wanting to get Gopal's association. He hears he's there in Mathura, so he decides to go and stay for 1 month in that house and listen to the list of devotees who accompanied him. And I'm reading straight from Bhakti Ratnakara right now. I have that little paper there. It says, the following Vaishnavas were present with Sri Rupa Goswami in the house of the Brahman in Mathura. Listen to this list. The merciful Gopal Bhatta Goswami, Bhugarbha Goswami, Lokanath Goswami, a reservoir of good qualities, Shri Madhava, Shri Paramananda Bhattacharya, Sri Madhu Pandit, whose characteristics are all wonderful, Premi Krishnadas, Krishnadas Brahmachari, Yadava Acharya, the merciful Narayana, Shri Pundarik Kaksha Goswami, Govinda Ishana, Shri Govinda, the magnanimous Vani Krishnadas, Shri Uddhava, who occasionally visited Bengal, Dvija Haridas, Krishnadas Kaviraj, Shri Gopal Das, whose body is completely spiritual, Shri Gopala, Madhava, and many others. Wow. What association, all together. And Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 1853 concludes, Eshaba Mukhya Bhakta Lana Nija Sange Shri Gopal Dharshana Kaila Bahurange. It was with great jubilation that Rupa Goswami visited Lord Gopal, accompanied by all these devotees. Then Eka Masarahi Gopal Gela Nija Shnane Shri Rupa Goshani Aila Shri Vrindavani. After staying at Mathura for 1 month, Shri Gopal Deity returned to his own place on Govardhan Hill, and Rupa Goswami returned to Vrindavan. Like a love affair, transcendental love affair. So, sometime later, Gopal was moved to Nathdwar in Rajasthan for his safety. And he's presently being worshipped there by the followers of Vallabhacharya. And in time, he became known as Srinasji. And he's very nicely being taken care of there in Nathdwar. And it's a wonderful darshan. So if you can ever make the trip, please do so. I hope that this lecture will inspire you, knowing more about Gopal and his wonderful history with all these transcendental personalities, how dear he was to them and they were to him, that this will inspire you to make that trip to Nathdwar. It's a bit of a trip. It's below Jaipur, another good distance from Jaipur, but it's worth it. So all of these things that we discussed today, and of all these things we discussed today, for myself the most touching was hearing how all those devotees went together with Rupa Goswami, and they just, that sangha, and associating together and worshipping Gopal, the deity, that deity who has the form of Giriraj holding up, or Krishna holding up Govardhan Hill. They stayed for 1 month together in the presence of that deity. And I was thinking that I would love to have the association of such devotees in such a circumstance. Wouldn't that be the greatest blessing of life? To be in the presence of such personalities. And I'm praying that my present service to Srila Prabhupada and the Sankirtan movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in association of my god brothers and god sisters and so many wonderful devotees, that by that Sangha, such an opportunity will come one day, either in this life or another life, to sit in the association of such an august assembly of devotees. And it would be what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu calls, we would associate with experienced men of happiness. That's how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes such association. To be in the company of those liberated souls. And we can achieve that by Prabhupada's grace, because Prabhupada lives in such association. And by serving him, we will one day live in the association of such Nityasiddhas, great devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, great devotees of Radha and Krishna. That should be our desire. Prabhupada called those personalities, those associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he described them as experienced men of happiness, real happiness. He actually used those words in his teachings to Sanatana Goswami. And I'll finish with that quote today from the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, page 171. And this is another one of my favorite quotes from teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Mahaprabhu said to Sanatana Goswami, all devotees of Krishna in full Krishna consciousness are free from all kinds of material pleasures and miseries. They are fully absorbed in service of the Lord, and they are always jolly by virtue of their engagement in his transcendental service. They are experienced men of happiness. I'll repeat it one more time. All devotees of Krishna in full Krishna consciousness are free from all kinds of material pleasures and miseries. They are fully absorbed in the service of the Lord, and they are always jolly by virtue of their engagement in his transcendental service. They are experienced men of happiness. May Srila Prabhupada one day introduce us to those experienced men of happiness. Prabhupada, take us to them, please. Thank you, devotees, for this opportunity to hear about Govardhan Hill, hear about Gopal, Vindapuri, Rupa Goswami, all those transcendental personalities. We'll be with you again in a couple of days with more nectar from Sri Vrindavan Dham. Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Gauranitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shamba Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, all his transcendental associates ki, all of our acharyas ki, Vindapuri ki, back home, back to Godhead ki, Shri Gopal ki, Giriraj Govardhan ki, Goloka Vrindavan Dham ki, take everyone in this material world back home, back to Godhead, to join that transcendental association. Jai Jai Sisi Radhe Sham. Hare Krishna.